Before we jump into questions, Megan, are there any little facets that you want to share with us, or should we go to questions?
About myself?
Sure.
I have 2 dogs that I'm obsessed with, Iker and Birdie. I suddenly can't think of anything about me. I also, well, in addition to the stuff that you mentioned, I have taught creative writing for a long time. I currently am teaching an online novel writing course through a program called Jericho Writers, which is a global, like, you can sign up from anywhere, and it's a year-long program where I basically, each student has a different novel that they are working on from idea to revision, basically, and I walk them. Well, I do a lot more than walk them through it. Sometimes I drag them through it. But yeah, so there's that. I collect miniatures. That's a thing about me. I always think I have I don't have any hobbies other than like reading. And I'm like, that doesn't feel like a hobby because it's so closely related to writing. So that's me.
Okay, well, thank you. And I think it sounds fascinating. First off, I'd like to start with a little bit of geography. Can you tell me a little bit about your connection to this part of Connecticut?
Yes, so I grew up in Bolton. Partially, I first lived my first 10 years in Vernon, and then we moved to Bolton, and I lived there until then I went off to college in Massachusetts. I came back for a year, lived in Bolton in my parents' house, and then what did I do then? Then I went to grad school in Massachusetts again, and then I came back and lived in West Hartford for a few years, and now I'm in Manchester. So I'm extremely local, and I just keep coming back.
So the key question is, you've seen the whale before?
Probably. Yeah. Did I remember it? No, but I enjoy it very much.
Thank you. So, I've read your newest novel, Cross My Heart. 2 questions, and you can answer them singly or together. What inspired organ donation as a subject? And is Donor Connect a real program?
So this book took the longest journey in my brain to actually come out, but the seed of it was in a really long time ago, 2008, maybe even 2007, in the 2000s, I saw this article that was about a woman whose husband had died, and his heart got donated, and she then was able to connect with the man who had gotten her husband's heart, and they struck up this really great connection. There was no romantic connection like there is in my book, but they had this really great friendship, and I was so struck by that. I just thought it was such a unique relationship that most of us will never have anything like that. That's so intimate, but also probably really potentially emotionally fraught, I think. And so I started to try to write a story based off of that actually was it was like a love story without a thriller aspect at all. Where a similar thing, a young widow, her husband dies, she finds the man who got her heart, and then she has this kind of almost conflicted love story with him. And I wrote 3 pages of that, and then, as I always did back then, I was like, I'm done with that, and what else is there? Basically, when it started to get hard, that's when I would do it. But that idea stayed with me for so long, and I would always come back to it. I don't even know what it is about it that just stayed when other things didn't stay and didn't keep coming back. But then when I actually published my first book in 2019, that was a thriller. And then, once you're kind of in one lane in publishing, they want you to stay in that lane, which was fine because I really like thrillers. But as I continued to write more books, I started just coming back to that idea, and I had sort of a epiphany at one point about how this could be turned into a thriller premise. And then I let it simmer some more, and then I thought of some really cool things that could happen in it, and then finally it was like, this is a story I need to write. So that's where that came from. Like if I had never just randomly come across that article, like this book over a decade later, like 15 years, would never have happened. And so I guess that tells us to read more articles. I don't know. You never know what will change your life. But yeah, and so the other question about, is Donor Connect real?
It's really
I'm glad it was you and not me. Is Donor Connect real? So Donor Connect, first of all, like just as sort of the elevator pitch for the book, it's about Cross My Heart is about a woman who, well, it's a heart transplant recipient who becomes romantically obsessed with the husband of her heart donor, even as she starts to hear rumors that he might have been the one, or he might be the reason that his wife is dead. And so the book opens with this messaging system, Donor Connect, which in the book is this way for people who received donated organs to communicate with the loved ones of the people who donated their organs, or if it was the case of a living donor, then they could do that. And so she starts communicating with this man, the husband of her heart donor, and it's all anonymous. And like there's this thing at the beginning of each message that like gets automated, like, we advise you not to share personal details unless you've both discussed that you're going to share them. And so Donor Connect itself is like, the name of that is fictional, but I did take it from something I saw that I think is called Donor Alliance, which is the same kind of thing, where I saw that people could communicate and that it starts off anonymous, but then if you both kind of say, I want to potentially meet or just like talk on the phone even, then you could set that up. And I didn't know about that until I was already trying to plot out the book, and I knew there was like this missing piece to it. And then I was just doing like heart transplant research, and I happened to see that, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, because the whole thing in this book is this woman starts becoming like sort of obsessed with this man, and like I always knew I wanted her to be like kind of unhinged, but she was going to be really unhinged if the obsession was completely just based on like, because he's also this famous author that lives in her town. So she figures that out. Like, she's not supposed to know, but she like does some sleuthing, and she figures out that that's who her donor's husband is. And so it would have just been that she was kind of like in love with him from afar, just from his social media, basically. But now this gave a way for me to ground her a little bit and like actually have her communicating with this man, and for that to be kind of the source also for this obsession that she starts having. But then also, then one day, the donor's husband, whose name is Morgan, meets a woman named Rosie, Rosie is the protagonist, in the cafe one day. They just bump into each other. And he has no idea that the woman he's talking to on Donor Connect is also Rosie. So it allowed for a way to like kind of up the unhingedness while also pulling it back a little bit.
Cool. Thank you very much. I was very curious about the whole Donor Connection. That was at all possible. Mm-hmm. I have a couple of questions about writing. Do you want them as a group or singly?
I want whatever you think is best.
You're getting a group then.
Okay.
It's easier for me.
Okay.
Can you describe your process in writing a novel? And is it always the same for each book? How long did it take you to write Cross My Heart? And do you follow a schedule? And was it the same for your other books?
It's roughly the same every time. I always say that every book kind of calls me to plan it in a different way, even if it's slightly. And like for this book, for example, I knew what I was building toward. I knew what the twists were. And so because of it, I knew I had to be very intricate with the plotting. And so I basically took over our guest room and had sticky notes up all along the walls, and I had never plotted in that way before. Like usually I would just kind of use note cards and just like flip through them or just be on my computer. But when it comes to, so that's kind of really the only variation. So I will plot it out, and then I will create an outline from my like jumbled plot points. And then I basically create an outline of each chapter right before I write the chapter. So I'm kind of always outlining, and then I write the chapter from the outline. And then once I finish with that chapter, I write the outline for the next chapter, because I'm very like, I need to have a plan. I need to know what's going to happen. And I always have to know the whole story ahead of time. I know a lot of authors, that kind of takes away the magic for them, which I totally understand. But if I were to just look at a blank page and just be like, okay, now start, like I never would. I would just be paralyzed by that. So, and in terms of a schedule, I usually I just, get to my desk at around 9 or so. And then I try to treat it like a sort of a 9 to 5 job, but never to 5 o'clock, because by then I'm my brain has no capacity for that. But I start at around 9, and then I'm on my social media for a half hour, just wasting time. And then I'm okay, no, I really have to do this. And then I usually have a word count goal for the day. That's the best way for me to keep going and keep kind of chipping away at it. And and this is something I always tell my writing students, is that I really believe in small, manageable goals, or not necessarily small, but manageable and reasonable. And so if I'm working on a deadline and it's several months away, I might do a 500 word goal for the day, which to me feels some days that's really hard, but that feels okay, I can write 500 words. And then, anything I do above that feels like I won the universe, because I met my goal and I exceeded it. And then if it's closer to a deadline, then I'll usually do 1,000 words. And I really just there are some days where for whatever reason I just can't meet that. And, but for the most part, that's how I keep myself going. And I will just work in the day until I meet that. And sometimes that's sometimes if I'm really lucky, that's 12:30. And then most of the times it's more 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And then, and yeah, and like I said, and then the rest of my day is usually recovering from using my brain so hard, which I don't know, most people probably don't necessarily need that after just a few hours of work, but I really do. So I just read, or a lot of times I take a nap. And that's an important part of the process, because I always tell my writing students this too: not writing is writing, because always, even in the back of your mind, you're working things out. And a lot of times I'll get stuck, or I will have a question what needs to happen for this to work. And a lot of times at the end of the writing day, I'll write that down. And then it's something about the fact that I wrote it down. It stays in my brain, even when I am reading, even when I'm laying down on the couch that happened to me today. I had written some stuff down for myself, and then I was I'm doing an event tonight. I need to seem like a human, so I need to take a nap. And then while I was laying there, things were just percolating, and I was kind of getting ideas. So not writing is writing. And that's why naps are an important part of my day as a writer.
I think that's fascinating. I think it's just a little insight to how you go about doing that, because most of us aren't writers and we don't know. So I thought Cross My Heart, and I'm going to talk about that most because that's the book I've read, had an interesting structure with it, from the human interaction to the online interaction and back and forth. And I thought, from what I could see, they both sort of played an equally important role. How did you pick that format, that back and forth? And did you hope that particular structure, was there something you hoped that would facilitate?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it a little when I was talking about the Donor Connect thing, that it sort of solved some plot problems for me, to add that in. But also, so there's that aspect. There's the messages on Donor Connect between Rosie, the protagonist, and her heart donor's husband, Morgan. But then there's also emails between Morgan and his best friend Blair, who he is telling her all about this woman Rosie that he just happened to run into in the cafe, and as they start kind of dating and what's going on there. And so as the reader, you are seeing Morgan from two perspectives. Then you're seeing the messages that he sends to Rosie, and then also the messages he sends to Blair. And sometimes the things he is saying and the way he's saying and them and the way he's talking is just not matching up, so that you kind of start to grow a little suspicious of this man. Like, and what I really wanted one of the questions to be as you're reading, particularly before like one thing in particular happens, is I wanted people to wonder who is more a danger to whom. Is Rosie more of a danger to Morgan with this kind of growing obsession? And there's some references to like things in her past that maybe went off the rails. Or is Morgan, who is rumored to perhaps have killed his wife, and now like is kind of being, we're seeing these discrepancies in him between the way he talks to these two people. Is he possibly more of a danger to her? And so the emails and the messages really allowed me to play with that in a way that, you know, just the straight narrative of Rosie telling her story wouldn't. And so that was a lot of fun to play with. And obviously, like, everybody talks to their best friend differently than they would talk to a person who got their wife's heart. You know, we all have one of those. So there's that too, and that's part of the question too. Is it just that, or like what is it? And so it was really fun because I had never done like, I guess, like a media little media bits, because there's also text messages and things with her and her best friend, which was really fun because my publisher actually formatted it to look like text messages, which was, I've had text messages in other books of mine, but this time there were kind of a lot of them, so they made it look like little bubbles and things, and that was just really fun. And there's also like YouTube, or maybe YouTube comments where she's reading those on this video of this man, and they made up these little like user profiles, or whatever they're called. What are those called? The icons. Yeah. Thank you. And different handles. And so there's the emails, but then there's also all these like other pieces of it, because also to just kind of like reinforce that so much of her relationship with him is like basically a parasocial thing. Like, she doesn't really know him. She thinks she does, but it's through these messages. It's through watching these YouTube videos of interviews he's done. It's through his social media and things like that. And so to just keep that distinction between what is potentially not that real and what is her real story that's happening in the moment.
Again, I thought that was a fascinating part of the story, just to watch the way people talked and how they talked, what allowed that to happen. So I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that. So here's sort of switching gears. What type of research did you do for this novel, and was it different than the type of research you had done on your earlier novels?
Yeah, it was very different actually, because normally I haven't had to do a ton of research ahead of time. Usually I'm writing about things that, they're these like crazy things that happen in people's lives, but the research I'll do will be like, oh, I need to know, like, what is this? And just things I can look up in my writing day as I need to know them. But with the heart transplant being such a big part of the story, I knew that I needed to kind of front load a lot of that research. And the biggest source that I used in this was this memoir called Sick Girl by, I believe it's Amy Silverstein, but I'm like a little scared I have that first name wrong. She's in the acknowledgments of the book. And And she is somebody who, like my protagonist Rosie, had a heart transplant in her 20s. She's also somebody who kind of got sick very suddenly and like did not know anything was wrong with her for years and years and years. And then she got the transplant. And then the thing about that book is that it's called Sick Girl. And before I read it, I assumed that it was called Sick Girl because she needed this heart transplant, and that's a very scary thing. But really, it's called Sick Girl because she makes this point throughout the book that once you get that transplant, it's not like you're cured, yay. It's like now you are sick for the rest of your life, and you're taking medication that makes you feel ill every time you take it, basically. And like you have to put on a mask just to go hang out with your friends and like pretend to be like the healthy girl. And so that was so important to my understanding of who Rosie is, because while she is like a little unhinged in her views of like love and relationships, it's also coming from this huge fear. Because another thing I learned in that book is that most heart transplants, people end up needing a new one within like 12 to 15 years. And so she's on a ticking clock really with this. And she says in the book, like, there's no guarantee. Like, she was really lucky that when she needed the heart transplant, a heart that was a match to her came up when she needed it and was in the right geographical area and all of that. And she's not necessarily going to be that lucky again. And so she really feels like she has this limited time to find a partner, to find someone to share her life with while she still has a life to share. And so like that, there were just things in that book that really, like, Rosie's story would not be the same if I didn't read her journey in particular. As, you know, and so I tried to embed that in different ways, like even her Amy Silverstein, I think, talking about the way she would feel when she took her medication, and how every single, like, she was at a wedding one time and had to have an alarm on her phone, or actually not on her phone, this was like before that. She had to like note when it was 10 o'clock because then she needed to leave the dance floor and go into like a separate area, take the medication, kind of like lean against a wall for a while she felt sick. And so I wanted to give Rosie some of that. So there's these moments where she takes her medication and she feels like a little ill, but also at the same time, I'm writing a book, and if she's just going to be like incapacitated by her medication the whole time, there's not a lot she can do in the story. So I wanted to have those pieces that are authentic to that, but also obviously still have a story that can keep going and have momentum. So yeah, that was just like a completely different experience for me in the writing of that. And I think a lot of times I shy away from stories that would require that kind of upfront research because I'm just so impatient and I just want to start writing the story. And you know, obviously that's an extra step that you have to do, but it was just like, it was such a richer experience for me writing it, having done that, and I felt like a responsibility to try to get it right as much as I can. And I've had, this was like, I don't know why this never really occurred to me in the writing of it, or even when like right before it was being published, but since it's been published, I've had a few people reach out to me who said that they've had transplants of various kinds, and that they felt that it was sensitively handled, and like, I'm like, whew, thank God. Like, and I've also had a couple people say to me, I'm on a list to get a heart. Should I read this book? And I was like, oh, I don't think so. I think maybe later, you know, I hope you get that soon. And then you can read it. Just cause I wouldn't want to personally if, like, I was going through that. But yeah, so it was just a whole unexpected side that I didn't really think about. It was just necessary because of the story, that like idea that I had, and I'm glad that I had that experience of doing that research and learning those things.
One of the things I was aware of, and I wouldn't have consciously thought, oh, that's because of her research. But the idea of the taking of the medicine and what the ritual was and how her parents used to be involved, and then also the self-consciousness or awareness of the scar and the reference, it was enough to sort of draw you back to, as you said, she's not really healthy. She's just a functioning sick person.
Yeah, and the scar thing, like, I am realizing in this moment, as you said that is another thing that I completely owe Amy Silverstein in that book for, because the cover of her book is her with like kind of holding her shirt to the side, and you see her scar. And I kept that book on my desk on top of a stack of books that I always have next to me. So every day while I was writing, like, I would just see that, and it would be this kind of unconscious or sometimes conscious reminder that, like, that is something that Rosie has all the time. And that's just another way that she kind of helped me to hopefully make her more authentic.
Thanks. Again, switching gears, one of the characters in Cross My Heart mentions writers and borrowing, or less kindly put, stealing ideas. I think of it as inspiring. Have you been inspired by the work of other writers, and who was really influential for you?
Yes, completely. I think, the thing I always tell when people say, like, I want to be a writer, like, what should I be doing? I'm always like, read widely. Like, don't just read the genre that you think you would want to write in. Read everything, because everything has something to teach you. Every writer has something to teach you. And I think that I said this in an event not that long ago, and I thought it was my idea, but I think I actually stole it from Adam Scott, the actor, when he said it on a podcast that we were listening to. I think he said that a lot of times, I don't remember how he said it, but to paraphrase, like, you try to write like somebody else, or I think he was talking about acting. You try to act like somebody else, and in the failing of that, you become the actor that you are. And I do believe that for writing. And I actually, I taught at the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts for a while, and I taught creative writing there. And one of the classes I taught was this class called Poetry from Poetry, which was my favorite class to teach, which was we would look at a poet really closely, look at their kind of signature moves, like what they're always doing, how they're like making these leaps in their poems. And then their assignment each time after we finished a poem studying a poet, was to write a poem in their style and to try to be them, basically. And it was because I've had this belief for a long time, and I have said that it's like trying on other styles is how we find our style. And so because it's like the distinctions between where we don't get quite, like, if I'm trying to be Frank O'Hara or Sylvia Plath, but I'm not quite there, like, that's the part that's me. And so again, that goes with this idea of like reading really widely, and those voices that you'll have in your head of other writers, like something will get in there, and like you'll maybe be trying to do something that they did, but you're doing it just your own way, and you're not quite getting it right to be them, but that's you, and that's becoming your voice. And so for me, like, it's because of that, I believe, like, kind of every book that I read, every writer that I read is in some way influencing me, whether I'm realizing it or not. But I think my biggest influence, and it's not a fiction writer, is Sylvia Plath, who is mentioned in the book. And because I remember reading her collected poems in high school, and I had been writing poetry, and it was terrible poetry, but I read hers, and I saw what she did with imagery, and how she would have a phrase that would be like, yes, like, I know that image you're talking about. I would have never thought to put it in those words, or to use that like figurative way of looking at it. And I remember like immediately my poetry writing changed because I saw what she was doing and I was like, I want to do that. And so I started to do that. And again, in the failing to be Sylvia Plath, which we would all fail to be, I found like my voice, which was still not great, but it was better than the stuff I had been writing before. And that still carries with me. And I mentioned that I went to grad school. I actually went to grad school for poetry writing. And so I have this background in poetry and this training in poetry. And that's actually what is the most fun part in the fiction writing for me, is the moments where I'm able to kind of find a really good cadence with the sentences, or I'm able to make a really great image and just tinker with the words in a way that I would if I were writing poetry. And so like that collected poems of Sylvia Plath that I read when I was 15 years old, like that is still influencing me in ways. But also in terms of like writers within my own genre, I love Tana French, who's an Irish writer. She's incredible with her like completely character driven but so suspenseful mysteries. I really love now I'm blanking on everybody again. Megan Miranda, who's publishing like a book a year basically. She's really great at having these propulsive thrillers that are also really digging down deep into emotional territory, which is what I always try to do too. And definitely inspired by that with her. And then my other like biggest inspiration, I think, is Toni Morrison, because when I read Beloved also in high school, my like life changed, I feel like. And I had never seen, because I feel like when you're a kid, you're just reading like entertaining stuff and you're reading the stuff you have to read for school. But when we read Beloved, it was the first time I had really seen fiction be as beautiful as poetry, and that it was still like a completely riveting story that I wanted to keep reading, though it's a very difficult like emotionally read. But also still having like the most beautiful language in the world. And that like showed me, you know, you can do both. You don't just have to be like doing poetry, or like you can meld those things and still have like a really compelling story. That was a really long-winded answer, I think, for who inspires you.
Well, I'll ask shorter questions. No, thank you. No, I think that's fascinating. Those are the kind of things we want to hear because, again, we don't know. So I think that's great. So thank you. Do you write for a target audience?
Oh, that's a really good question that I don't know the answer to. I guess no. Like I think you are supposed to think about like who is my ideal reader. But I think if I were to have that in my head, I think it would get in the way of things. And kind of like my target audience when I'm writing is myself, I think. And it's like, what is the story that I need to tell? What is the story that I want to tell? How is this going to exorcise something from me that I've either witnessed or lived in one way or another? And I've never lived any of the crazy scenarios that are in my books, but the emotional territory comes from real places. And so I think, and then of course, like sometimes as I'm writing, I think like, you know, I think the people who enjoyed this book of mine will hopefully like this too. But yeah, I really think I don't think about that too much. And if I did, it might scare me too much and I just sit there and not know what to do. But then afterwards, certainly when I start to think about how am I going to market this book, you know, and the publisher is supposed to do all the marketing. But more and more authors also have to do a lot of it themselves. And so I will think about like, what about this will appeal to readers of my past books? What other readers could I reach? And that's when I start to think about that.
Okay, thanks. I was curious when I told someone I was reading your novel, Cross My Heart. I got the that's different for you. So I was curious. I enjoyed it a lot though. So, but that's made me think of the whole target audience thing. Um, do you consider your books mysteries, psychological thrillers, whodunits, love stories, or all of the above, or is it simply a story, just simply a story that needs to be told?
Um, it's so funny because, and I tell this story a lot, when I wrote the book that would become my debut novel, The Winter Sister, I did not realize that I was writing a thriller. I don't even think I really realized I was writing a mystery. There's a murder and she eventually solves it. Like, it is a murder mystery, but it never occurred to me because it was just a story I wanted to tell. And I had written 2 novels before that my agent had shopped around but never got bought by a publisher. And those were not, they were just more like kind of family dramas. And so then I had this idea for this book. And because I hadn't been published, I hadn't been in kind of like a marketing sense. It just didn't really occur to me that I was writing a thriller until the book was announced and it had the label of thriller. And I said to myself, oh no, I think they made a mistake and called it a thriller. and then I was like, wait a minute, murder, solving the murder, a bunch of unsettling things. Like, no, that's a thriller. Yeah. I think what it was is that I thought of like thrillers as like I don't even know if John Grisham would be the right thing, but like those types of novels. But like really the thriller space now is a lot of women writers who are writing these very smart, very interesting, interesting crimes or whatever is happening, like dangerous things, but that also have a lot of emotional depth to them as well. And I just didn't really know that like thriller encompassed that too. And I think it's just, I think publishing doesn't really know what's the difference between a thriller and a psychological suspense because they use them interchangeably so many times. But yeah, I think now I am, whenever anybody asks like what kind of books I write, I say I write thrillers, or I'll say psychological suspense. And they always have some kind of mystery. There's always something the characters are trying to figure out. There's always some kind of very dark element or situation to it, usually a murder, but not necessarily. And I really love that because I love getting to explore like why do people do terrible things, and also getting to write characters that like do and say these horrible things, and you kind of are like play acting as that, and it's like you get to be for a moment somebody that you would never be and do things you would never do. And I'm not saying I want to murder anybody or do anything like that.
Thank you for that.
but yeah, it's just like, and also like thrillers and psychological suspense, whatever you want to call it, they kind of cover all the big themes like grief, love, jealousy, betrayal, like whatever it is, whatever you're writing about in the particular book, but they do it through this like, oh my God, what is going on kind of thing, which makes it both like emotionally rewarding to read, but also just really fun to read.
I'll agree. It Cross My Heart was fun to read.
Thank you.
And I thought with the twist and the turns and the not knowing what's coming next, it could really grasp anyone's attention.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you.
yeah. Has your writing changed over the course of your 5 published novels?
Yeah, I think I looked back at The Winter Sister, my first book, recently, and was just flipping through some pages, and I realized how, I mentioned that like poetry thing mixed with the prose, and I realized how much I lent on the poeticness, and I was like, oh, this is a lot. Like, and sometimes it doesn't always have to be like so pretty with the wording. And I think that's something that I've learned more and more as I go. Like, I still always want to have like all the sentences be good sentences, and there to be like those lines that like you want to underline. I really want to do that. But I've learned like where to find the balance of that, and like where to, and to not just be doing that the whole time. And I hope that like actually makes it more powerful instead of less powerful. So yeah, and I don't like, I still like The Winter Sister is very near and dear to me because it was my first published novel. But yeah, and I think when I was writing that book, like I said, I had no idea I was writing a thriller. So as I've gone along with these other books, I've been able to like lean into different tropes and things within the thriller genre and try on different things. So yeah, I think it's always changing. And I always like to think about, when I'm writing a book, what is the thing I'm doing new in this book that I haven't done in a book before? Because, well, not because I was doing this already, but one time and I will not say who it was, but I was moderating an event for a very famous author and a very best-selling author. And I asked her that question because I always ask myself that. And I was like, so what is new in this book that you're doing that you haven't done before? And she said, oh, nothing. And I was like, oh. And I didn't really know how to respond to that. I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, it's just a very classic, insert her name here, novel. And I was like, okay. I mean, she's also written more novels than me, so there's that too. Like maybe at a certain point you just can't do something brand new. But I feel like I always want to be challenging myself to do something new each time that I haven't tried before, whether it's something structurally or something with character dynamics, or like this book, Cross My Heart, there was the structural thing, but there also was, I have never written a true twist until this book. I've written big reveals, and I always like to remind people that there's a difference between a reveal and a twist, but I think people tend to use those interchangeably, and that a reveal is like surprising new information that you're like, and it's still really interesting and whatever, and it changes the course of the story. But a twist is when you kind of thought you were in one story and then something's revealed that you're like, nothing was what I thought it was. And I truly believe that those should be rare, because like if you were doing that every single time, it's just like, then you're sort of just writing twist for twist's sake, and I feel like the story might suffer. But how did I get onto this topic? I just completely lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. So for Cross My Heart, it was the first time that I did like a true like thriller twist like that. And executing that was so much of the challenge in writing this book. And so that was definitely a new thing that I was doing. So yeah, I'm always trying to do a new thing. And I think my writing hopefully is every time just like naturally getting better after going through the process of writing a whole book and then editing the whole book, and then, having feedback from my editor and just constantly learning and growing.
It certainly was a twist if you read the novel, which was great.
Thank you.
Who do you enjoy reading if you had the time to read for pleasure?
I do have the time to read for pleasure because, like I said, not writing is writing. Okay. So I just recently read Rachel Harrison's new book that comes out in September because I got an advance copy. I had already pre-ordered it, and then I think I must have won a Goodreads giveaway that I entered, but I had no idea, and it just appeared at my door, and I was like, and I made all these noises I'd never made before. But she's a horror writer, but her books are, I love them so much, and they have the most distinct, like, she writes about a different thing every time. Obviously it's a different story, but I said this recently, I did a review of it on Instagram, and I said, I think that somebody could give me 3 Rachel Harrison pages that I'd never read before and not tell me who the author is, and I would know that it was her. And like, she just always has these great premises, and there's something so comforting in her books, even when they are so dark. And so I really love her. And who else, like, am I always really excited for every time they have a new book? Oh no, that thing again. Well, I mentioned Tana French, and I can't think of literally any other person in the world. Emily St. John Mandel, who wrote Station 11. That's another book that I really love. She hasn't had a book come out in a new one come out in a couple years, but she's somebody who, like an author for me. I don't need to know what it's about. I don't need to see a cover. I don't need to know the title. I will be pre-ordering it. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, for aspiring writers, if that's any of us, here's the questions. How did you get signed with Simon & Schuster? Did you ever consider self-publishing? And what was it like to market yourself? And do you have any tips for developing writers?
So, my whole like publishing journey is a very long story that I won't tell the whole thing. But basically, I mentioned I had written those other 2 books. I got a literary agent, and that is a whole process. You have to query agents, and you get a lot of rejections, and the agents are basically the gatekeepers between the authors and the publishers. They're the ones that submit on behalf of the authors. And so I finally, got an agent, and she sent out the first book that I had, or actually it was the second book that I had written. And then the time went by and nobody bought it. And then she went back, and the first one that I had written, I worked on with her, and she sent it out and nothing happened. And we got close like a couple times. It was almost harder getting close a couple times than just like nothing at all, because you're like feeling you're almost there. But then I wrote The Winter Sister, and same thing. She submitted it, and it was a long process too. Like 6 months went by before we got our one and only yes, which came from my publisher Atria and Simon & Schuster. And so it was just kind of like that's basically how it goes if you're in traditional publishing. Had I ever considered self-publishing? I did once consider when because I had an agent before that agent, and it turns out you can have a bad agent, which is what I had. And she ended up dumping me, which is really just terrible, because it's like, no, I should have dumped you. You were bad. But so I was very like adrift for a while and thinking like, okay, I had tried and it didn't work out, and like maybe I will go the self-publishing route. And this was like in 2012 maybe that I was thinking about it. So it, like, I feel like indie publishing has really come into what it is now only in the last like 10 years or so. And there was still like a stigma attached to it at the point that I was thinking about it, but it was kind of starting to go away. And so I did think about it. I even had my sister, who does some graphic design work sometimes, or she had like a web design business. I had her create like a cover for me, and then oops, I never ended up using it because I didn't actually self-publish. But I thought about it. I thought about going that route, and I was like, all I really want is for people like to share these stories with people, and like this is a way to do that. But ultimately I didn't, because it is a lot of hard work, and I admire so much people who self-publish and like really are successful at that, because you are doing everything on your own. You're paying for everything on your own upfront, editing, cover design, all of it. And all the marketing is on you, all the publicity is on you, or you can hire a publicist, but that's more money too. And it's just so much hustle. And I honestly don't know how they do it. And it's just it's not in my skill set. And I think some people either, they just learn those skills because they want to have that kind of control, and that's appealing to them. That's not appealing to me. So I didn't go that route ultimately. And then the advice for aspiring writers, this is something that I can only give as advice now, 5 books in. It's completely different than the advice that I used to give during my debut when people would ask me. And now my advice is, while you're here at this moment, not published, but maybe your goal is to be published, figure out like what it is about writing that brings you joy, and find a way to hold on to that. Because publishing, like, not to dissuade anybody, but it's really brutal, and it's really grueling, and it's such an emotional roller coaster, and it has the highest highs and the lowest lows. And that can really impact your ability to enjoy the reason you first wanted to do this in the first place. And I've definitely had that struggle where it's like, how do I get back to the joy of it? You know, when the thing that was your passion is now your job, like it's just it can really kind of mess with you. And so I tell people now to like figure out where that joy is and what it is, and always, like, I don't know, write it down, put it someplace, lock it in a little box, and then open it up when things get hard and publishing is kind of like messing with your mind. Because that's actually something that, like, it feels like they can take that away, but they actually can't. And that's something I've had to like learn and relearn, that like, not to get too deep with this, but I was talking to my therapist about this like experience that I've had with a certain aspect of publishing, and I said, like, you know, it was really creatively crushing, and then she said, and then I said, but now I'm seeing, like, if this hadn't happened and this hadn't happened and this hadn't happened, like, I wouldn't be doing this. And she was like, because your creativity could not be crushed. And I think that that's really important to remember, that your joy, your creativity actually cannot be crushed, but there are going to be days where it feels like it is. So find that thing to hold on to, and just remember, like, there's this thing that they say a lot, I know, in teaching, that I actually find to be very toxic, but like, remember your why, and like why you do this. And it's kind of like a way to just keep people doing things without giving them everything they should. But that's it. It relates to this too. Like, why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? Strip away everything else. Like, what is it for you? So yeah.
Okay, Megan, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. But before we get to signing and sales, I'd like to end this portion with two questions. What have we missed that you think people might be interested in?
I guess, like, one thing we haven't talked about is the two big things that I wanted to explore with this book, which was one, I keep calling this in my head, or I have called it in my head for a long time, the panic of singlehood, meaning the panic in your 20s or early 30s when you're seeing all your friends start to find their person and get married, or like go to the next milestone, even if it's not like a romantic context, and like you're still just you. And how I think society sends us these messages a lot of times, that if you're not in a couple, then you are, like, not necessarily less worthy, but like you're like, okay, well, come back when you're a complete person because you found your other half. And I always say, like, I would never call my husband, like, no offense, I would never call him my other half, because, like, I am a whole person on my own. But, like, you know, in certain points in your life, you don't know that yet, and you think, like, there is somebody that I'm supposed to find, and like that's when I become complete, because we're fed these messages. Even, and I like had a little moment in the book that touches on this. Like, even if you think about, a lot of times you get a wedding invitation, and if you're in a relationship, you'll get a +1. But if not, if you're just single, you don't get a +1. But what if you wanted to bring your best friend? What if you wanted to have like a comfort person there, so that you're not like at your boss's wedding and like awkwardly just standing there? And so I really wanted to write about a woman who's very stuck in that mindset of, like, I need to have a person, I need to find my soulmate in order to like truly live, and to investigate that, like, that is a lie. You are a whole person on your own, and that is the journey that she has to go through in the book, to kind of discover. And the other thing that I really wanted to explore and tackle in this book is the way we often label women crazy, in a way that I do not think we label men crazy. I think that label is so often and so carelessly and easily applied to women, without looking at, okay, well, you're seeing their actions as crazy, but what's causing that? Like, why are they acting that way? And what have maybe you done to get them there? And I saw this quote once I don't remember who said it. It was like some random thing on Twitter. It was years ago, but it was this thing, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was like men will call women crazy without ever asking themselves what they might have done to make her behave that way. And that really informed a lot in this book too. And there are moments in this book where like you're like, oh, that's pretty crazy. So I definitely wanted to walk that line, but there's also investigating that term and why we go to that in like except for maybe certain political leaders, like I don't really hear people calling men crazy like that. So that's something that I really wanted to write about, and it seemed like a natural pairing with this idea of the woman who's just so crazy to find love and crazy to find love, but actually let's look at the society that she's steeped in that has sent these messages that's like her purpose in life, and that's what she has to do. So yeah, that's just something I would add, that's those are the two main things that I really wanted to explore in this book.
Okay, thank you. And the one other question I had was for all of you. Do any of you have any questions you would like to ask Megan? If so, I'm going to have to pass you the mic because the TV needs it.
I was thinking, Megan, when you said that you had the idea for this book like years ago, do you keep a little list of like if you have an idea and say, hey, that might make a book someday?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a what is the word? I guess in my notes app, I have like a little note in my a note in my notes app in my phone, where anytime I just get even like the glimmer of an idea, as vague as it might be, I jot it down in there. And I always like to tell the story that sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night with the most brilliant idea. And so I write it down in that. And one time it just said, people go to a cabin and something happens. And that was my brilliant idea in the middle of the night. But yeah, I'm always writing those down. They often are not the ones that actually become a book, or maybe there'll be some small seed of it. But there have definitely been times when I'm like, okay, what is my next project going to be, that I go back and see if any of those are kind of speaking to me. Because otherwise I would completely forget it. Because sometimes I look at that list and I was like, I don't remember conceiving that at all. But okay.
Okay, any other questions for Megan? Yep.
I don't need it.
If the TV needs it.
The TV does. Okay, Megan, did I hear you have a new book coming out?
No.
I thought I did. No?
I guess maybe just that Cross My Heart came out. I don't have any news to share. Okay. Only can say that I am working on something that I find to be very fun and twisty and exciting, and I am happy to share that news officially. Once it becomes news, I can officially share.
That was my very last question, was a hint for the future. Any other questions for Megan? Yep.
So I feel kind of bad asking because they said your parents are here, but how much do you pull from like your own life and from like growing up in Bolton? Like I'm thinking of the family plot, being on a small island behind the head, the Red Door being kind of that small town in New Hampshire, and all those situations, the family's all kind of crazy. So again, sorry, mom and dad, but how much do you pull from, growing up in a small town and your own situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do get like, people are always like, are your parents okay? And I do always say like I have had some really talk about unhinged like parents in my books, and it's like honestly none of that, not just because they're here, has been inspired by them. I have said before in different contexts that like I'm really interested in the concept of a bad parent and what that looks like, because there's so much. I'm not even a parent. I mean, I have dogs, and so I'm their mom, but I'm not a parent. But I know, and what I see everywhere is like all this pressure to do this with them and make sure they hit this milestone, and don't you dare let them eat that or look at that. And so I'm really interested in like looking at when it veers from that and what that means for how a person would grow up. And also it just gives them really great trauma that I can play with in the in the present storyline. So that in particular is not based on real life, but like the small town things, definitely, like living in Bolton. I pretty much, now I'm not totally sure, but I think all of my books take place either in a small town or like a Manchester type town, which is where I live now. And people have said, like, I think my agent said to me recently, like, what if you had a book that took place in, and I can't remember where she said, and I was like, well, I don't like know that world. I've only lived in New England. Like, it would not be authentic. Although now the thing I'm working on does not take place in New England, and it's like I've never been there, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to look at Google Maps and do Street View for a while. So yeah, and I also I liked growing up in a small town. I know for a lot of people that's very limiting, but for me it was very comfortable. And also I think it's really great, a fertile ground for thrillers, because small town secrets, everybody knows each other, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. And the other thing I'll say is that, like I mentioned before, a lot of the emotions in the books are like things that I've felt, things that I've witnessed, things that I want to explore. So that's like sort of the personal part for me. For example, in Behind the Red Door, the main character has anxiety, and that's a big part of her journey. And I have anxiety, and I had never seen my type of anxiety written about, and I wanted just kind of to see that representation. And so that was something I put in that book. So there's definitely different things that make their way in. And a lot of times I think I might not even realize like this is a personal thing I'm putting in until later. And then other times the like personal pieces will be like, I needed an example of I need an endearing thing that this husband character did, and then I'll just pick something nice that you did. So it'll like little pieces of my life will get it in a very literal way sometimes in that way. Thanks for that question.
Yep.
Megan, I don't have a question. I just have a little comment. I have not read your book yet, but I did go on to Amazon to do the sample thing, and that your first page, you made a comment about cats, dogs, and people, and I thought that was great, and it was like, okay, I'm reading this book.
Thank you. What she's talking about, if you haven't seen it, is my author's note, which is, it says, there are two pets, a cat and a dog, in this book who never come to any harm. I can't, however, say the same for the humans. And I put that, and I actually am surprised at how many people have said that they bought the book because of that author's note. But because I get so anxious when I see a pet in a book, and I'm like, no. Especially if it's a thriller or horror, I'm like, nope. And for movies, there's doesthedogdie.com, which you can go to, and immediately I have stopped watching movies that are like, yeah, it dies. I'm like, nope. But they don't have that for books. And I knew that there was these two pets, and I did not want my readers to be like so nervous the whole time. So I was like, I need to put that in. And then I was like, but like humans are fair game.
Any other questions?
I had a comment. I was struck by what you said about your first agent, because I recently heard a memoir with Tony Hillerman, and one of his first agents told him, ditch the Indian stuff. And his whole book, all his novels are about the Navajos and the Indian nations in the Southwest, which is his signature. So sometimes you get an agent that could give you really bad advice.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you're in such a vulnerable place as a writer who's trying to get an agent, because they have all the power in that situation, and they are the like key to getting your dream. And so it's really easy to, especially because most people go through so many rejections, that when somebody finally says yes, that you just like, you're like, yes, 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 you cling on. And what happened to me that first time was I had two agents actually who had offered to represent me, and it was really hard. I couldn't figure out what to do, but I just had this like, I just kind of had a gut feeling about the one that I chose, which I guess turned out to be a wrong gut feeling, but not really, because everything has led me to where I am. And I chose her, and then like pretty soon it was like, you're not acting like the woman you were acting like when you were trying to get me to say yes to you. So, like, just like she was not great at communication, and it was a lot of things. But yeah, and at the time when she was like, I'm not into your second book, so let's go our separate ways, like, it felt like the worst thing ever. But it was like a really great thing. I'm glad I like now my agent, like she's, and that taught me I need an agent who's good at communicating. I need an agent who's going to like be a great editorial agent too, who's going to like be there with me in the story and help me brainstorm things if I need. And like, I trust my current agent's storytelling instincts almost more than anybody's. And so, yeah, so there are bad ones out there, and a lot of times people don't talk about the bad ones in a public way, so a lot of authors just don't know. But yeah, that's just a sad part of it. But I always say, like, make sure you know what you want from an agent, and that you don't go in with that scarcity mindset of like, I'll take anybody.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Yep.
Speaking of pages at the beginning of the book, you dedicated this book to people that relate to the song The Prophecy, or women in love who people call crazy. Taylor Swift obviously influenced you quite a bit in this book. She's mentioned several times, and the two parts of the book are song titles of hers. So can you speak to how she influenced you while you wrote the book?
I would love to. Thank you for that question. Oh yes, Taylor's on my water bottle as well. I almost put that when I was giving facts about myself at the beginning of this. I was almost like, and I'm obsessed with Taylor Swift, but I don't know. It just didn't feel right in the library I grew up in. So yes, I am so inspired by Taylor Swift. I always say I think she is one of the best living poets that we have, and yes, I do think she is a poet. I think people who aren't familiar with like her actual like catalog will just hear her songs on the radio that are meant for sort of mainstream mass consumption and be like, this person? And I understand that, but you have to listen to all her stuff. And the way that she writes with such clarity, like she writes, a lot of times people falsely call her lyrics simple, which like is demonstrably untrue. There's so much craft in them that I could go on forever about, but I think that they are confusing simple with clear. And the fact that she can like get to the heart of something in one line, and it'll also like stab you in the heart. Like as an example, the line in you sound like you know about Taylor Swift, so you'll know the 10-minute version of All Too Well, when she said, oh God, this is my all-time favorite song. You kept me like a secret. No, help me. What is it? Yes. Thank you. I was like, I feel like I'm mixing up. You kept me like a secret, but I kept you like an oath. Like the first time I heard that, I literally clutched my chest. Like I felt that in every part of me, that like she's saying, I mean, I feel it's very clear, like I said, her clarity, but I will say like that this person treated her like she was something that needed to be hidden away, but she treated them like something that she would like vow to be with forever. And just the way she's able to hit something so emotionally in just one line, I'm so inspired by that. I strive to have those like similar power in one-liners. And I also am just really inspired by the way that she writes about love. And, you know, as this was a book in a lot of ways about love, I love that she discover so many new facets of it. She has this reputation, or this like kind of false belief that the world has, that continues even to this day in 2025, that she just writes about her ex-boyfriends. And first of all, it's like literally every musician has like breakup songs and love songs, but whatever, we don't talk about it with them, I guess. But the thing is, she's not just writing about her ex-boyfriend, she's writing about her, and she's writing about her feelings and like love and betrayal, love and jealousy, love and feeling like you belong for the very first time, and like finding this like prism in it with all the lights bouncing off and creating all these new colors. And I just found that. So I had this whole playlist. Oh, and now I realized I left my little playlist cards at home that I was going to give out tonight, if anybody wanted them. But I had this whole playlist that I made while I was writing this book to keep me in the headspace of this character, Rosie. And so she was very inspirational to me in that way. And then the one you mentioned, the dedication, is for anyone who relates to The Prophecy by Taylor Swift. And I had written the book before that song came out, because it came out in her album last April, but I was at the point where I was in copy edits and I had to do the dedication. And I think, no, yeah, okay, I was gonna say the one where I like almost dedicated to you it again, and then I was like, no, wait, and I changed it. But you got the first one, so it's fine. But yeah, I was struggling, like, what am I dedicating this to? And then that song, I heard that song and I was like, this is Rosie's theme song, The Prophecy, because it's the song about like you feel like you found the person, you feel like you found the relationship that's going to go and like stand the test of time. And then it falls apart again and you're left alone again. And you start to think like, that's how this is always going to be. And I'm always going to be like alone. And that's very much Rosie in the book. And that's very much that feeling I was talking about that I wanted to write about, the like panic of being single in a world where like, it's like, you better couple up. So yeah, I dedicated it to her, or not to her, but to people who relate to that. And yeah, so like, I feel like I've already gone on too long about this, but I could go on forever. Thank you so much for asking that question. Like my entire closet door in my office is covered in pictures of her. Like she's just my biggest inspiration. I should have mentioned her, I guess, when you were asking about that, but yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Megan. Our time here in this part is sort of drawing to a close because we need to have some time for cookies, by the way, please eat some cookies, and signings and sales over there. So thank you, Megan. Thank you so much. I really appreciated this.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out on this like dreary, awful night. Like, thank you so much. And thank you also to Cindy over there of Book Club on the Go. She's the one selling the books. And she is amazing. She does a lot of, you should definitely follow her on Instagram, Book Club on the Go. If you don't already, I'm sure you have cards over there and stuff. But she does a lot of events around the state and in Massachusetts too. A lot of like book fairs with a lot of authors that come, and different vendors like jewelry makers and other people, and and sometimes there's people who make cookies and fun things, and she's always just doing the best events. So yes, thank you to Cindy for being here.
Okay, well, thank you, and please head on over that way and stop by our front desk if you want, or if you want to take one. We have program bookmarks, by the way, very handy to let you know what's going on at the library here. So please keep us in mind for future events.